Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here in this space, this virtual space. My name is Sandra Montes-Martinez, and we are Western District coming to you from the Church Planting Commission. The Church Planting Commission for Western District are providing leadership and resources for church plantings initiatives and foster relationship with emerging Anabaptist Mennonite groups. The Church Planting Commission help emerging groups and their leaders to connect with congregations, resources, staff, and instruction within our conference. So thank you all for being part of this forum. We are grateful to be here with part of the Church Planting Commission and staff for Western District. I would like to welcome Heather Regier-Crater, our Executive Conference Minister, Tonya Wenger, our chairperson for the Church Planting Commission, Nita Nichols, which is part of the support group for Church Planting Commission, Tim Amor, pastor of Summit Street Mennonite Church, and part of the Church Planting Commission, and Gilberto Flores, pastor for Casa de Paz in Guatemala. So welcome, and welcome to all of you who will see this transmission in later spaces and time. Today, we're here to connect and to open the conversation about how we're sharing our faith, how we're sharing our mission in the church as individuals and as congregations. I would like to say that in our experience in the community of faith, in the church, we understand that we all have the responsibility to share the good news of the gospel, to share our own story, walking with Jesus as our Savior. But the mission of the church rests on our hands to proclaim the good news to everybody. So how are we doing this, and how the new normal that we experience right now are affecting the way we do church is some of the subjects that we're going to be talking in the future conversation. And we start today in how we share our story, how we connect with others to share the gospel and to be in proclaim the good news of Jesus in our life. That is a conversation that we need to reflect in as individuals and as a church. And we're trying to do church together. So we invite Pastor Tim Amor this morning to share with us his experience replanting Summit Mennonite Church as a not only a pastor, but as a promoter of thinking outside the box, if we may say that, when we do church. How we connecting with our communities, how we listen to the needs of our communities and the church, and how we're responding to these needs and to this new way of being church together. Pastor Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. Always good to be able to talk about these things. These are things I'm excited about. I like talking about. So today we're talking about sharing the story, the idea, how do we have meaningful conversations? How do we talk about our experiences with Jesus? And this is important mostly because as Anabaptists or as Mennonites, we have done a good job maybe of trying to live out the story, but we are terrible at talking about the story. We do not like talking at all. We would rather people just somehow look at our lives and magically encounter Jesus on their own. So that's why we're having these conversations. The first bit that I'd like to start with here as a question, and I think that this helps center things from an Anabaptist perspective too, is whose church is this? When we talk about church, who does this belong to? Does it belong to the people who are multiple generation Mennonites? By ethnicity? Does it belong to the people who are the oldest in our church, the people who give the most? And since we have so many very smart people on here, I'll just hop because this is the Sunday school answer. The church belongs to Jesus. That is what we do. Jesus at the center of everything. What are we willing to give up for our preferences and our desires for the way of Jesus? And that shapes all of the things that we do. But that brings us to the question, how do we begin to even have meaningful conversations? What would a meaningful conversation look like with our neighbors? Do we even have meaningful conversations anymore? And as we look at these, we always have to remember too that this is going to be relevant in different ways to different cultures, right? America isn't just one single culture. There's a whole bunch of cultures and things going on here, and conversations are different place to place. I'm from Canada. It is inappropriate to make eye contact at the grocery store in Canada. Here, if I go grocery shopping in the United States, if I reach for the same cereal box as someone else, they'll tell me their entire life story. That is very different. So we're working on some different things. Why don't we open that up as a question here to all of the people that are here? If anyone would like to share, how can we begin to have meaningful conversations with our neighbors?
I think it sort of implies that the question implies that we have meaningful relationships. So do we have meaningful relationships with people who are post-Christian or nones, however we define that? Do we have people who are in a search for meaning in their lives? So yeah, I mean, I think those sorts of conversations, if we allow them, I think those come naturally if we have people around us that are in a search.
And Kathy, you're actually demonstrating, though you did a good job of getting the cattail out of your picture while you were talking, but you have your cat with you today.
That is how does that help?
Great connecting point.
Okay.
That's how we make, why are we friends with the people we're friends with? Because we have things in common, and finding areas that we can talk about in common. More of my neighbors talk to me since I've had children. If I had a dog, maybe they would have talked to me because I had a dog, but walking around with kids, I mean, everybody wants to talk to you.
I think, Tim, that it begins with a place of compassion and not judgment, to build trust. Like, to have a meaningful conversation with someone, you have to come from a place in your heart where you're going to be open to hearing what they have to say without judgment. And that's a hard call. I mean, we're all human, and it's, our nature is sometimes to be shocked or to be in awe, or to say, oh my goodness, I can't relate, or whatever. So I think to even begin to have a meaningful conversation with people, we have to remind ourselves, me included, to come from a good place. And I think then that opens it up to understanding one another, especially when you talk about cross-cultural relationships. It just has to come, the beginning has to be open, an open mind and an open heart.
And I would maybe step back even before the meaningful conversation, and that is that we actually need to know who our neighbors are, to actually have contact with them, to become acquainted, to be in spaces and times where we could interact with them. I think often our busyness means that we are coming and going without paying attention or taking time to be out and around in places where our neighbors would be, or to take time to meet them and get acquainted in the first place. So that for me would be a first step, is simply actually making contact with and getting acquainted to know who are the neighbors around me.
Yeah, and when we talk about neighbor being someone who could really be anyone in the community, somehow along the way, we've also forgotten to connect with the neighbor who literally lives across the street sometimes. What do we know about them? How are we caring for them? I'll slide through a couple things we have here. These are all things that someone's pointed out at one place or another too, but in some ways. But the first step is always prayer. How do we have those conversations? Prayerfully first. Right? Prayer is the starting point for most of the things that we suggest in any form of ministry, because that's what Jesus did. And if Jesus thought that was a good idea, then it's probably a good idea for us too. And from there, we need to know our neighbors. You need to be able to have a conversation. You don't just meet someone right away and start having deeper conversations. And when we're meeting people and we're befriending people and we're being kind, hopefully it's with the center of Jesus's love that we're spreading that love, not just with this end hope that we'll be able to have this conversation to do a little check mark on our list. And that will come from, I think, a deeper spiritual depth for who we are as Christians. And that's going to come from the love of Jesus, right? To love our neighbor who is very different than us. Mennonites traditionally, as do Baptists and other Christians, we've recognized that sitting down and having a meal together or having a drink together, coffee, whatever, that changes the way that we feel. That changes the nature of conversation. You have meals with people that you like, and you have conversations with people that you like over meals sometimes and over food. That's been really hard during COVID. That's been really hard as someone who has young children. How do we do this with all of that other noise and other things going on? But that is part of the conversation. How do we get into places and situations where we're able to just be ourselves and be alongside someone and be comfortable, have something to drink, something to eat together? So really, we have to know our neighbors and we have to love our neighbors enough that we can have those conversations. But then, and maybe we're already doing that. Maybe that's a bit of an easier step. And maybe it is hard because we're busy, there's other things, but at least we know some people. But how do we move from just knowing people to talking about our experiences with Jesus? That seems like a big jump, doesn't it?
I think one of the things they encourage or mobilize us as a Christian to talk about our experience is when we really have an encounter with Jesus. The Bible is full of stories of people that encountered God in their life, in their situations, in their everyday life. So I think how we can talk about our experience with Jesus is sharing our own experience with Jesus. It's sharing our own stories, our own encounters in our faith life, in the ordinary life, in the everyday life, how we see God in actions among my family, my work, my community.
It seems like another way to talk about our experience with Jesus is to be honest about our questions, our struggles, or the ways that we seek Jesus or that we desire to follow Jesus, even when we aren't succeeding all the time at that, or even when we don't always understand how that works out. For example, right now, I struggle to know what it means to be a follower of Jesus in the face of war across the other side of the world, and what that impact is on the rest of the world. I want to follow Jesus. I want to be a peacemaker. I want to love my enemies as Jesus calls us to, but I don't know always how to do that. And so sharing that struggle with someone honestly, I think, is another way to talk about my experience with Jesus, and to even say, to ask a question, how does your faith inform, or how do your values inform you in this? Or what questions do you have? Let's talk about that in light of Jesus' teachings. That for me would be another way of talking about my experience with Jesus.
That's very good. Thank you, Heidi. One way that's maybe helpful, especially if we've been Christians for a while, is at some point someone shared their experience of Jesus, their experiences with Jesus with us. And when we think of those times, there's times where that felt weird, maybe, or it felt unnatural, or it didn't really connect. It felt like we're being talked at. But there's other times, I'd hope, where it felt life-giving, where it was exciting. And so the idea here is, how do we talk about this? Well, we find opportunities because we're excited to talk about it. And we know what that does for us too. Using personal language. We are engaging in a world of facts and non-facts and what's real, what's not. But when we talk about our own personal experiences, that allows people to participate in the conversation, right? We're no longer talking about something that is outside and we have to define. It's defining for ourselves. So who is Jesus to me? Who has Jesus been to me? We talk about our past and how have we been seeing Jesus at work lately? What are the challenges? Like Heidi was saying, what are the challenges now in our faith that we're struggling with and working through? And that invites people into conversation. And I think it's really important to note too, that we typically come with language that's unhelpful. Christian language, Christianese, whatever we want to call it. And so as much as we can, I encourage people to, and I encourage you, write these down and try and figure this out in one small sentence and then read it through. And does that make sense to someone who's never heard of it before? But simple language of a Christian is, especially in a world where Christian right now can mean anything. So there's all of these competing values here. So some of it is, how do we talk about it? Well, to me, a Christian is, to me, Jesus is, to me, church is, and try to always think too that we're at an advantage in America because so many people already, if you were to ask almost anybody in America, they would be able to answer these questions, whether we agree with their answers or not. There are other parts of the world, again, including Canada, where I'm from, where people would have no starting point for this. So part of it then is listening and adapting and adjusting on there. And again, as Heidi wisely pointed out, it's about listening too. We can't share with someone if it's only a one-way street. It's not our job to go out there and to preach at people. It's to have a conversation, to listen to what they have to say, to find those opportunities for them to share their doubts too, their wonders, maybe to share their moments of, I don't really know what to believe on those things, but this one thing happened to me and I don't know what to do with it. And as Nita was talking about before too, it's about, as much as we can, embodying the love of Jesus in those moments. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control aren't just a good idea. It's what happens when we live this prayed out life following Jesus. And we're not always going to do that perfectly. But when we are gentle, when we're the kind of people who don't seem judgmental, maybe, when we're the kind of people who can sit and watch and be with somebody else, then we're the type of people that others, our neighbors, will want to have deeper conversations with. They'll be comfortable having those conversations with. And we'll be comfortable, hopefully, having those conversations and loving them. There are no exact ways of doing these types of things. But we're just trying to reflect now on what are some possibilities, some ways to think about this a little bit differently. And I think that this is an important one for us as Anabaptists, and that would be, what unique perspectives might our faith community have to share?
We see in our traditional congregations how we make many efforts to supply the needs of our congregants, the people they join our congregations, and we have a responsibility to them. When we do church together, one important thing is trying to establish what kind of church we are. Like the question you do at the beginning, who's the church? And now what is our community faith purpose? What we in this community, what we are calling to do in our own settings. So move away from inform the church to form the church, to be able to share and accomplish the mission that was given to us as a Jesus followers, as a disciple.
Thank you, Sandra.
When I share with my friends and acquaintances, coworkers, what church I go to, I go to a Spanish speaking church. Well, that immediately gets their attention and they're, and then I start explaining it and they have questions of, well, how do you connect? What are all, they start thinking barriers in their head. And so I'm able to share, my perspective that, it doesn't really, the barriers aren't really barriers, because it's heart to heart fellowship and love and affection, and there's other ways to communicate. So it's really interesting how many people have said to me, oh, well, I'd like to come, or I want to visit. Whether it's family or friends, they kind of see me and the way I look and the way I act as, well, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too.
I recently attended a webinar hosted by Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary by one of their professors, Drew Strait, about white Christian nationalism. And that really reminded me of the importance of our perspectives, that, and it's not just Anabaptist perspectives, other Christians also share this with us, but to distinguish between Christian nationalism and being a follower of Jesus. And that we are not aligned with one state or one nation or one race or one economic group, that is idolatry to do that, and that following Jesus means that an alternative to that. And so I think when we talk about our faith, and one of our unique perspectives is to say, this is what it means, and it doesn't mean that. Sometimes we have to distinguish between and clarify what it means to be Christian and to follow Jesus, because people bring many different assumptions to that, and many different experiences that may or may not fit with what we're actually talking about. We don't only want to be correcting other people's assumptions or saying we're not that or we're not this, but to be clear on what we do believe and how that does present an alternative to many assumptions or many ways of doing religion in the world. So I think being clear about that, being informed about that in the world is important in how we talk about our faith. And that may depend on our context and where, knowing what people are bringing, knowing what they come from and where they might have gotten their ideas about being Christian.
And I think that hits on some unique things that are happening now. Whatever we believed was happening in this country 10 years ago, in the last 5 years, that has very much shifted. We bring a uniqueness as Anabaptists, not just in that we hold on to verses like this in Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers. Well, what does that mean? Not peacekeepers, the ones who go into the trouble and create peace where there wasn't peace before. The reason that's at the center of things for us too, justice, mercy, humility, is because Jesus is at the center. So while we're trying to go and point away from things that are not Jesus, I think we do that always by pointing to Jesus. Well, what would Jesus look like in that situation? Anabaptism, our Jesus fundamentalist center, really speaks into the culture today in America in ways that others just cannot. So this is where we get stuck, I think. After sharing the story, how can we invite others into the story?
We believe the great achievement of sharing our story is be able to walk with others in their own journey as a Jesus followers. So the church and us as individuals, as Jesus followers, has a great responsibility. Maybe we are a great church abroad, and maybe we do a lot, but how we walk with others in this journey is as important as how we communicate, how we share the story. So as a congregations and as individuals, we need to even practice how we're going to do this and have, I would say, plans or follow-up steps to move forward. Otherwise, it's like the person that throw the seeds in the ground and never come back to see the fruit of their labor. So it's important for us as a congregations, as a conference, as individuals, to do this follow-up, and hopefully we can give some ideas today, but it's you in your own settings, in your own congregations, the connecting with your community, connecting with your own spaces, is you discover how to follow up, because we are in different times. Maybe before we just go and knock on the people's door, but now we have different doors of the church, and now we have different approach to people. So we need to understand that it's just not one way to do it, but we need to explore the different ways how to continue and walk with others in their faith.
Yeah, how do we continue a conversation? Maybe part of it too, right? It's not just this one moment.
I think when
There is a
people when people hear, especially established churches, I think people would hear this, they'd quickly glance or hear this after sharing the story. How can we invite others to church instead of to the story, into the story? So I think we've kind of been ingrained in the established churches, maybe traditional churches, as inviting people to quote church, like come to me, come to where I go, come to my setting, come into the sanctuary. And I think that's so ingrained in us that we probably don't realize even what you're saying is how can we invite others into the story, which is different than coming to my church, my setting, that you aren't aware of or aren't experienced with, and experience it like I've experienced it for years as a child growing up, and it's new to you. So I think it's very interesting to think about and to make clear that we're inviting people into the story, not just the church building.
Yeah, Nita, I resonate with that, what you've shared. It seems like we need to think about, where do we experience the story? Where do we experience transformation through the Spirit? Where do we experience the presence of Christ? Where do we experience God's work? And invite people to share that space, or to be there with us, and to ask ourselves, how are we being invited into the story? It's God's story, actually. It's not our story. It's not my story. And whether that is around our tables at home, in our backyard, in our community organizations, on the street with people, and maybe also in our church. That's good. That's one good place, but it's not the only place where we experience the work of God and the story of God's creation and redemption. So that is really important to me, is to be asking myself, where am I experiencing the story? And it could be all over the place, in any place, in many ways, many forms, in addition to the church, as you said, Nita.
I was having a conversation with a friend who's thought about this in great detail. And her response, as we got comfortable sharing with each other, she said, sometimes I think that almost everything we do as church goes against the mission Jesus gave his church. And in some ways, that's kind of what we're describing, right? Like we have this thing that is so foreign on Sunday mornings, and we think of that as church, this place to kind of get people to, but we have nothing designed on those Sunday mornings to actually be inviting and open and a place for those people to be. It's weird. But I do think that when we invite others into the story, we have to remember to move beyond the old evangelical personal Jesus and invite someone into the community somehow. That doesn't have to be the Sunday morning church service, but engaging within the community of Christ, because we can't show all of Jesus by ourselves, but some strange way the Holy Spirit works through the body of believers to show that the fullness of Jesus through our imperfection and such. So I do think that somehow engaging in community, what does it mean for us to follow Jesus together? That's what church is, following Jesus together, inviting someone to follow Jesus alongside us, taking those little steps along the way. This idea where we were meant to be, or Jesus calls us to be, this community. And if we're going to use a buzzword, we'll use missional, which is really just the same word that it always is, which is, are we actually doing what Jesus asked us to do? Are we going out, or are we just hoping that people come to the building? Are we out in our community and loving people there, having those conversations? Because church has just so often worked as this kind of ivory tower where everything is great and we hide up in there and we yell out from the top of a building and we hope that some people come. And then when they don't come to our doors, we blame them. When they do come in our doors, we wonder why they didn't like what it was and why they left. And when we have young people who grow up enough that they realize they don't want to stay in those towers anymore, we blame them or their parents for not passing on the faith. Is typically what will end up happening. And so then our churches just end up getting stuck in this place of building and what it always was. And so much of it just comes around serving the building. I saw someone comment recently, playing on the rich young ruler going to Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus responds, well, you must sell all of your buildings and follow me. But then the church went away unhappy because she had beautiful buildings. Ooh. Or do we get stuck on these things? And so church for a long time has always worked expecting people to come to us, expecting that people would first believe the right things, then they would, after they believe the right things, they behave the right way. They sing and they do everything as they're supposed to. And then maybe after a while, after they've believed and behaved long enough, we'll let them belong as a part of our church. If we are a traditional ethnic Mennonite church, that means their grandchildren may eventually be considered part of that ethnic tradition somehow. But what if we're always looking at this wrong? We want people to come, but then we want so much out of them before they're able to fit. And what if we've been thinking about this all wrong? In fact, what if we look at the way Jesus interacts with people and we see that he flips this upside down? So I think when we look at Jesus's ministry, the first thing that he does with people is he loves them. He lets them know that they belong with him. He is a person that they can be with. And then he invites them to participate alongside. You don't have to believe all the right things. You don't have to know everything. Come on, follow me. Let's do this together. And from there, eventually, as time goes on, belief starts to grow. Faith starts to grow in new ways. We have to wait until well after the resurrection in the Gospel of John, well after Jesus has appeared to 10 of the 11 remaining disciples, for one of them to finally interact with Jesus and say, "My Lord and my God." The doubting Thomas is the one who actually has this new thing. It takes a while to get there, but Jesus has to be at the center of everything, right? If Jesus is the center of all of our faith, Jesus is at the center of all that we're doing here. That there's this hope that God isn't just interested in us getting converts, but is interested in taking his kingdom come and making it a reality here on earth, untwisting out the sin and bringing in this new life, this new joy, this new hope. And that's why we share, because we want others to experience that joy and that hope. When Jesus calls his disciples, he tells them to go. It starts with going, not waiting for people to come. Success in following Jesus in this way and sharing our faith will just be, I think, in faithfulness. Are we going to try? Are we going to prayerfully do the right things? That is success, not more BIPs. Butts and pews does not equal success. Success is faithfully following Jesus, listening to the Spirit, and sharing in appropriate ways. Success is mission. When we look at Jesus's ministry, again, sometimes Jesus would preach and thousands of people would say, "That's too much," but others wouldn't. We don't know how the Spirit moves in those ways, but we know that Jesus knows what Jesus is doing. So let's follow that mission. Being Jesus's church means following Jesus together, not just getting people somewhere on Sunday mornings, but following Jesus within the community together, loving our neighbors together, being a caring enough community so that if I were to invite my neighbor to church, they'll probably have already had a number of experiences with other people, maybe like Jesus, who, "Oh yeah, I know that person," or "I know that, oh yeah, that person was kind to me." And it just means, I think, being church belongs to Jesus, but also means embodying the mission. And I think Anabaptists traditionally have done this well, trying to live out a good life. So here, I have an example of what church, or we think church, looks like. So we have this church building, we have all these people in the church and these people who are outside the church. Some are closer than others. So if you are pink, you are on the inside of the church. Those blue dots are on the outside of the church. And our first question is, what can we do to get those blue dots in? And maybe we don't realize that there actually isn't any room in the church right now for them. We've blocked them all out. There's no way in there. But I think when we start to look at how the Spirit moves, it has less to do with who's in the right box as in what direction we're headed. Who is moving towards Jesus and who's moving away from Jesus? Oftentimes, people who think they're in that church box and have all of their check marks done are moving away from Jesus in their lives. Sometimes people who seem the furthest from Jesus are already heading the right direction towards. And so that's what we're looking for as we try to have these conversations, inviting people just to start taking steps towards Jesus, having these positive moments here. And I think it starts with us leaving that church building, recognizing that the church building isn't the place where people will have those deep, impactful conversations for the most part. It'll come from engaging with people. It'll come from listening to people's questions. It'll come from, if we're loving people in such a way and the Spirit's moving, we'll see people move towards us and our story, and from there point towards Jesus. As we talk about the challenges facing America, or the challenges facing the churches in America, we have to recognize that there is a very different church here. And that is becoming more and more clear to many of our neighbors. there are lots of people who feel like there is no place for them in the Christian faith because they don't vote like others vote. They don't believe the same things others believe. They don't support a military complex like other people support that. They think maybe it's okay if people got health care. We should care for them. And that's suddenly seen as outside of the church's purview. And what's really ending up happening more and more is we're seeing that there is this empire religion, or the American religious church, which is very, very different. It looks like a very pretty building. It is very much has the flag and American values at the center, but people within that box aren't all people who know Jesus. The greatest mission field in America may be people who are already in churches, or people who have already been in church and left. And so there we're called to, as Heidi was talking about, let's point to Jesus, let's point to what's different. This is what Jesus says, let's do that, and let's call and invite people to do that. And so in this image here, I have someone who's outside the church who's asking questions because they're interested. We have people who are inside the church moving away from church and Jesus because they're being disillusioned by what it is. But we have others that are being called to see Jesus. What if we came a little bit closer to Jesus? I think the example of faith and how faith works, we get it mixed up. So let's, with apologies, I'm from the city. Let's think about cattle. If you've ever worked with cattle, I'm sorry. I'll do my best. But cattle out in the field, how are we going to keep our cattle together? For too long as a church, we thought that if we just put up the right kind of fencing and it was too painful for people to leave, or if we kept the right barrier, who's in and who's out, that would work. And that works sometimes for cattle. In Nebraska, cattle often get out, and it's your fault if you hit them. That's weird, but so obviously the fences don't always work, but that's what we're going to use to keep them there. But there's another way of doing things, and we see that maybe in a wider ranged area where cattle will never stray far from a watering hole. The cattle with a watering hole do not need to be held in strictly by fences. They can range and they'll go out, but they'll always go back to where there's fresh water. And I think it's the same with Jesus. If Jesus is the fresh water, if Jesus really is refreshing, if our churches are really embodying Jesus in such a way that coming here is fun, maybe it's life-giving, it has all those things we're looking for, and then people will want to be there and be around people like that. But it just comes with, will we embody Jesus, not just on that Sunday morning, but as we leave the church, will we embody Jesus in such a way that continues to point to his love? And then, so what kind of churches, what kind of communities, what kind of followers of Jesus will we be? Will we head out to those waters? Will we head out to those places that are far away, those people who feel like maybe they're far away, and let them know that there is a place for them, that they do belong with Jesus? Invite them to participate. Some of those people who are already feeling they don't belong are already doing fantastic things. Let's invite them. They would be so excited to be a part of some of the things your church communities are already a part of throughout the cities and such. And then let's let them believe and ask questions along the way. Let's let the Spirit do the moving, not us. As a reminder for what we talked about at the beginning, it all comes from prayer. Let's be prayerful, not just morning and nights, through the day. Let's be prayerful and ask that the Spirit opens our eyes and helps us to be aware of how Jesus is already working now. And that's how we will share our stories. So that is a bit of a quick flash through presentation on some things. And I'm sure you've all heard of that stuff in one way or another before, but that brings us back to how do we begin to have those faith conversations with our neighbors? What might looking to Jesus and the way he does stuff through these lenses here, what might that change for us as we try to share those stories with others?
I think that question prompts thinking about what do people care about these days? What is on their minds? What are their challenges? And what does Jesus have to do with that? That's about being relevant, right? And connecting with the things that matter for people. So I see that as part of the task of the church, is to be asking, not just what does Jesus do for me, but what difference does Jesus make in the world and the issues that people face, and how does Jesus speak into that? What does our belief in Christ mean for that? And, those are some really big issues that become very personal when people are impacted, whether that is poverty or violence or global, climate change and the environmental crises, immigration or people being displaced, sexual identity and challenges that people have. So I think we need to be asking the question is how does Jesus relate to those things? What is God doing in that? What is the good news in relation to those questions that we might have that people are experiencing?
Yeah, one important component that I can see among that and is inviting, prayerful, inviting the Holy Spirit to guide our sharing. We can be the best storytellers in the world, but it's only Jesus, the power of God, who transforms lives. So pray and connect, that connection, a spiritual connection with our God, is the one that gives us the component of the power of transforming lives as we speak, as we're sharing our story, as an individuals or as a community of faith. So inviting the community to pray about it, to purposely have this meaningful relationship with God is what gives us the story and what invite us to put Jesus as the center of the story that we share. Because otherwise it will be another great story, but no, the transformative power that we receive when we invite Jesus in our stories and to share with others that story.
I think, Heidi, you do a good job of reminding us too of the importance of good news. How is Jesus's love good news in this situation? Because too often the good news we think we're giving is really just good news, or that Christians maybe in the Western world get, is good news to us, but bad news to a whole bunch of other people. The good news of Jesus will be experienced as good news for all people. It'll probably be experienced as bad news for that rich young ruler, the people who want to hold on to power and other things. But the truth is, it's still good news for them because it frees them from the slavery of that type of bondage and that type of thing in their life, that necessity there. And so I think that's always a good reminder to me. Is this really good news? How is it good news? One thing we've had some success with at our little Peace Church replant is the people who have been coming here have felt open to asking questions, and they have been excited to share some of their experiences. So one of the people who had come to our church was having a conversation with another friend that I knew, and she said, I was just telling her about what this has meant for me, what it's been like, and this is what she said back to me. She said, well, that sounds like the kind of place that I'd go to, but I'm not religious, but that sounds like a church that I'd go to if I were. What a great starting point for a conversation. What do you mean by religious? What do you mean by, well, then maybe that means the things that we have been trying to do to be a place for people where they feel like they could belong have been working. We don't really know until other people express it in their lives as much as we hope to do it. So let's look at what our neighbors are telling us by the way that they talk to us or don't. Let's look at how our community responds to our church community by whether they participate with what we're doing, whether they feel they could come here or not. And if they don't feel that, well, let's give up everything for Jesus. Let's ask the right questions. What could we do so that we could share these stories with our neighbors? But one thing that we will try, and I'd encourage others to try this too, and I've done it a bit in the past, but we're going to do some faith interviews with people at church. We'll video that, we'll be able to share that, but we'll have ice cream maybe or popcorn while people are here hearing it. But it's one thing to be invited to a church service on Sunday morning. It's another thing to be able to go somewhere in an evening where you can just kind of relax and hear your friend's story. That's entirely different. So that's kind of a hoping point, not just to start teaching people what it means to tell their story, both the ones who are being interviewed to tell their story and those of us listening, oh, that's how I would respond to it, but also giving opportunity to invite others to hear the stories of our friends, both in person, hopefully experiencing that love of the community, and later could always send things out virtually. It is imperfect. It is not the same as inviting someone into Jesus' story, inviting them into a building. Anyway, that's thank you to everyone for involving on that, and or interacting too, and I'll pass everything over to Sandra.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for going through probably the basis, but essential aspect of sharing our story as a Jesus followers, as a community of faith, as individuals. So thank you for all of you for participating in this conversation. We have some questions that we would like to leave for us to reflect in and to think in our own settings, in our own day-to-day life as a congregation. These questions will help us to continue the conversations where we are. I understand these congregations that are fully invested in sharing the story and to connect with the community, listen, connect, and respond as a community of faith, and others that are still working on this process or discovering what it means to do these things. So what would you like to know more about our church planting in your community? How this looks like? What is church planting for you? How can my church be involved with church planting? And how can my faith community reach out to our neighbors? And many, maybe other questions that we can do, we can explore together as a community of faith and as a church planting commission. Our church planting commission in Western District are actively ready to respond and to work together through these conversations. We have a team put together. Nita Nichols is one of our support church planting team. And the whole conference is ready to answer and work with you with these questions. We understand that we are called to the Great Commission, to call people to repent from their sins, to invite people to become Jesus followers, to equip the saints for the ministry, and to share the good news with the world. My name is Sandra Montes-Martinez. This is Western District Conference, working for you and with you to become witness in the world. Blessings to you all.